please set up your show. So I'm really glad to have three great ladies and curators, artists here to finish this day, and on a topic that I'm really keen on hearing and sharing your ideas. It's about curating and because I've been doing it as well and thinking about it, and also receiving loads of calls or actually proposals for sent to open calls about projects, and I really think that it's the issue here is context. It's so contextual, and the huge interest from artists is very often also shows that there is no sensitivity to the context, to the urban context, or to the site where the piece is supposed to be made. So I think that's one issue that is really, I hope to hear some of your ideas or things relating to that. And many times, if you don't own a screen or a facade, then you have to build your own context as well. So context on kind of both sides of the thing, either creating context or adapting to existing contexts. And I know you all have lots of things to say. So Susa Pop from Public Art Lab Berlin will start, and after her, Nerea Calvillo from Media Lab Prado, and Heidi Tikka, Artist Helsinki.
Okay, so thank you very much. So now we have our last 40 minutes, and before we go into this discussion, curating on urban screens, I would like to give a very short 5 minutes introduction. If you are a curator or an artist, what does it mean for you if you work with urban screens or urban media facades? Yes, together with Miriam Stuppek, we started with this 2008 festival where we curated and produced around 25 mainly interactive and participatory art projects. And then later with the 2010 festival, they were also together with all the partners around, I think, 35, 40 projects. And yes, I would not say it is a grammar, but there are some things we really should have a look at. And then I think it helps very much to curate, yes, interesting projects. So, of course, first of all, we look at the character of urban screens and media facades, and I think the most important is the location and the environment. Where is this media facade based? Yes, is it at the crossways? How is the view on it? Is it, how can I say, very high up, or is it just opposite to you? And this is very important. Is there a foreplace to this media facade, or is it just as a crossing? And this is very important if you would like to develop content. And the next step is the public audience. So who is passing by there? Who is the neighborhood? Are these inhabitants, or are, yes, these just tourist passerbys? This is very important. Also, is it a waiting situation, or is it a transit situation? The next point, the technology. Of course, very important, the technology, what kind of screen is it, or is it a projection and not a screen? So we have, of course, different LED screens, LCD screens, rear projections, and so on. And so, of course, it has to do with the resolution of the screens, the size and the format. And most of the screens have no audio. Maybe for a special event, you have to equip them with audio. And then this whole operational system behind the screen, the access to the internet. For example, at the Media Facades Festival Europe 2010, we could have printed T-shirts where there would have been written on it 2 Mbit upload. This was the magic word. If you want to make live stream or connect the cities, then this was always these 2 Mbit upload. These are things we have to deal with. Then, of course, from the public space, the interactive access. What kind of interfaces do you create or are already existing? Mobile devices, mobile phones, then of course motion tracking and sensor technology. So there are lots of possibilities. And then we have time and mobility. How long can the content be shown? Is it the content for a whole day, or is it just for small slots that you show the content? And when we are at this topic, we are at the last point I would like to mention, and of course, which is important, is the owner or the screen's holder. Who is running the screen? Is it a commercial screen that is run by a screen holder who has a chain, a whole network of screens, or is it just a single one? Then is it a commercial screen holder, or is it a cultural owner? Yeah, so these are all these information which then, of course, lead to the question of the finances. How are these how is the content then, of course, financed to be shown there? And at least what we will, I think, talk about is then, of course, what content then can be shown on these screens. I think this is the major question, what we can ask ourselves, and also what is the potential of these screens. So I would, from here on, pass on the word to Nerea. And later we can discuss all these possibilities.
Thank you, Susa, and thank you, Mina, for the presentation. I'm going to present very briefly our experience of 2010 relating to the Media Facades Festival and the first year of our screen. In fact, Media Lab Prado owns a screen, a very large one, as you can see in the images, with very low resolution. So it has a very particular technical specification. And what we proposed as a general concept for this period, and also related to the Media Facades Festival, was to try to understand the potential of, as Martin mentioned before, that the mobile technologies are the ones that connect all of us to technology and to the smartness of things and cities. We try to see, as a hypothesis, whether these urban screens have the capacity, at least, to become the digital elements that allow us to connect within each other, so that they could be our collective digital platforms somehow. So we started understanding the screen as an infrastructure more than an interface only. So an infrastructure that could be accessed and used by as many people as possible. So for this purpose, in order to generate content for the screen, we produced this workshop following the methodology of Media Lab of collaborative production workshops. And we developed one just for the content of the screen. And the general idea of the workshop was to try to involve as many people as possible, or at least it was not about quantity only, but it was about how to engage different kinds of people, different kinds of publics, different kinds of let's say, urban groups within the production of the content of the screens. So you can see here, for example, in this image, one of the discussions in the workshop. Everything was produced collaboratively, and each of the projects tried to address a different environment of the city. One was using the neighborhood and young people from the neighborhood. Others were trying to discuss about very, very specific collectives. And then as if we had the infrastructure and what happens in Media Lab is that is right on the facade of the building. There was this participation, or more than participation, like stronger engagement, let's say, or how to involve and implicate more people within the process, but also on the outside. So, which, as Susa was mentioning before, which kind of public or users or citizens, who's outside, and what's the structure of the plaza? Because it's a very, very specific site in this case. Which kind of urban context are we using, activating, engaging, etc., etc.? So, very briefly, I'm going to show these 3 projects because they touch, from our understanding, very different possibilities that these urban screens produce or give us. This first one is Tetris, Lumo blocks, that was also shown in Berlin and in other cities. So the idea of Lumo was playing. And the fact is that this project, although it was built by programmers, so it didn't involve that many people, although it was a large group of programmers, but it didn't involve that much people during the production process. It involved loads and loads of public, you can see here, within the White Night in Madrid during the Media Facades Festival. And the thing is that it's been running every Friday within the plaza, and it's been activating slightly the plaza on Fridays and changing the activities of the plaza from drinking outside by very, very young kids to a little bit more playful and more communicative environment than before. Of course, it's things that don't, let's say, eliminate one to each other, but as in an urban space, they just overlap and enrich the city life, let's say. In this next one, let's see which one is next. There was another project, which was this one, which was engaging a very, very specific collective, which was the gay and lesbian community with mental disease. And it was a project which only, let's say, tried to give voice to this community. So the participation was more at institutional level, but and it was by very, very, very specific people who were already connected within each other. But the possibility of expressing themselves within an urban context and seeing that within the public space people were listening to them, were paying attention, and were engaging with their problem was very, very, very powerful. So this is a session that happened with Brussels, with the connected cities, and although there were not many people in the space, there were many people listening to the conference by streaming. So participation was made at a very, very different level. It was more invisible, it was more slow, but the institutions that were connected got very, very excited and built up connections that are still running. And the last one is this DJ session that happened at the very beginning, the opening of the festival, in which it was a more ludic experience, in which there was this VJ playing within the plaza. And what we realized was that with this playful atmosphere and with the images that this Maite Cajaraville DJ was playing, which were relating to the cultural references of old paintings and contemporary topics such as gender, race, as we saw this morning as well, within the public space, it was generating many, many different situations within the plaza. As you can see in these collage that there were many different activities and many different situations that were happening at the same time within the space. And we can say that an urban space that is generally quite empty managed to become a public space, an active, real political, social, and and a live public space for the time in which the session was happening. So these examples are just tiny tests that are allowing us to see or to start identifying what are the strategies, the potentials, and the opportunities that these urban screens have in order to become public infrastructures. I'll leave it here. Thanks.
Okay. So it is my task here to bring into this discussion the point of view of the artist, and I also I think that I want to expand this discussion a little bit, because so far we have been talking about screens that are readily available for artists and infrastructures for ready-made urban screens. And I think that sometimes they are very great possibilities for artists to work on that kind of screens. But sometimes we also want to produce our own screens. Why would we want to do that? One reason might be the element of surprise, so that sometimes we like to make interventions into public spaces and take them by surprise. Because I think that what is good in this kind of existing infrastructures is that they provide a very stable environment for work, which is missing, like when you start to build your own technologies. But they also tend to come with their own context, and I think that is perhaps something that we want to discuss together. Like in my presentation, I want to look at like a different cases. That of working with an existing infrastructure, and then the case of trying to build your own. And I try to approach that question from a kind of systems point of view, asking what kind of variables are involved, like when you work in these different kind of environments. And those variables, they can be environmental, related to, like as Susa suggested, and they can be social, like you know, how a particular place is used. By environmental, like, you know, we may consider like what kind of light is needed for the work, or how light changes during the day. And I think that the key question, like, you know, from an artist's point of view is how are these different variables identified and tackled with? First, like, you know, when the piece is being planned, and next in the process of production. So it's a kind of ongoing process where you deal with different variables. And I think that like the work of an artist working with these variables is a kind of work of framing. So that the question is what kind of variables you frame in and what kind of variables become framed out. And those decisions are strategical decisions that we have to engage in. And as an example, I will use a project of mine called At Hand, which is like a interesting case because for a couple of years I have worked on the ethnographies of body languages, asking people to explore their body languages, their hand movements in front of the camera. And of that material, different kinds of installations have been produced into urban spaces. And I'll just go through a couple of examples really quickly. So at the moment, some of this material is being seen in the Europe metro station in Paris. And what is interesting in this one is that here the work is being shown on an existing infrastructure, so that I just popped in the DVD and it was there. And so most of the technical questions are framed out in this case. But the social use of the place was really important part of the work, so that I had to question like what kind of, like from where do people see these screens? I think mostly from platforms, but also from trains. And I had to question how do they look at these screens? And my interpretation would be like it's not so much. They are not so much looked at through a direct glass, but more like in your peripheral vision and by this kind of within this kind of looks of the journey, which I think is a like important pattern to consider in this kind of situation of an urban screen. And also, another pattern that I found interesting here was like how people may encounter these, because like this piece is on for several months, so people may encounter these in their everyday encounters with this particular place, or they may just accidentally get into them. So they are very, I think that there are many different contextual factors that one needs to consider when working on the edit for this kind of piece. The first version of this piece was set up 2 years ago on a public touchscreen, and so here the idea was that by touching you were able to explore the details of the person's hand, so that it was a different configuration, both in terms of the narrative aspect of the work and also in terms of the technical configuration and the user experience. And so in addition to those social and environmental variables, there were also a lot of technical variables that I had to deal with here, because this was a very complex site. City Wall, which is this public screen, it's called City Wall, it provided the basic platform, but then we had to develop our own application on it. And the management of those different layers and the negotiations at the interface were fairly demanding and complex, also because this was a co-production to which many organizations participated. And I think that's one problematic with this kind of urban screens, that there are layers of actors or players who participate in the production of this kind of project, and how those boundaries are negotiated, I think, is an important question. And then my last example is even more complex, I think, because here, after the City Wall, an idea came up to create a movable touchscreen setup. And this was produced in a work group where Jaakko Pesonen, who presented this morning, was working for the design of our movable setup, and Teemu Korpilahti was working on the software development, and I was responsible for the production and the audiovisual aspect of the work, or the visual aspect in this case. And we were interested in the possibility of making a temporary intervention into the city space, and we felt that this is really important that artists start to take over the city space outside these existing screens, so that we can bring in our own context, and we don't have to rely on those contexts that are embedded in those urban screens that are out there. But this work. But the work on this movable setup added yet another layer of complexity. I think that we tried to frame out some of this complexity by reducing the variables. Here the changing place was a key variable that added a lot of complexity. And then we decided that we are going to place this into a particular place only for one night, then to reduce these technical and other complexities from the other side. But yet, like each time when we installed this piece, revealed new technical challenges, so that this kind of building up of technical variables was a kind of constant process that we had to work on. So, one problem that we had, which we encountered, was the material of the glass, the window glass, so that when it was too thick, or if it was structured in a particular way, it didn't let the infrared light through, and we were not able to get the touch response. So how then to start to work with this kind of problem space? Like, should we frame out those windows that are not responsive for this kind of setup that we have, or should we start to frame the technology in a different way? Like with Juho Joutimäki, we experimented with another version using Kinect. So it's a kind of ongoing negotiation and work on this kind of experimental interface. So for this discussion, I have suggested that we should consider how different those situations are in which media artists work with urban screens. And this mapping that I have started with you is a very preliminary one, so I mainly offer it for our discussion, but I hope that we can go on from there. Thank you.
So thank you very much for this interesting project in terms of content, what you showed us. And yes, as we all know, if we work with these urban screens, it's not like working or sitting opposite a TV at home where you just can zap through the channels and say, oh, I'm not interested in this content. May I get the next one? So it is there, and so it has to be chosen, I think, very carefully. And so the question maybe to, yes, let's start with you. The question to you, Nerea, as you have a lot of experience with curating urban screens, how do you develop a concept for the topic, what you would like to show, a curatorial program for the screens, the urban screens? How do you do this?
I think it depends very much on the context in which the screen is, and in the context in which the experience of the project is happening. What we did, for example, for the Media Facades Festival was to try to identify the projects that were trying to expand and open up the public engagement in general. What was more difficult, because we have the screen all the time during the year, what was more difficult was to try to schedule the projects within time. So try to identify which times of the day each project is more suitable for, what happens with the daylight, what happens with which kind of users, citizens, passers-by are there in the square. So there's many different factors that are somehow framing the possibilities of one project for being more suitable, interesting, etc. within one space at one time. So yeah, I think that would be like in general. And what happened, for example, in our case, which was very interesting, was to see which kind of contents were easier to handle and to manage within the public and also at an institutional level, because, for example, the games, where everybody loves them, but then how long are you going to run one game on and on in one single plaza? Which kind of urban space does it generate? So yeah, what's the duration of play and game within such a space? But then, on the other hand, the more critical social projects really, as we saw this morning, are more intense. They make people question their own preconceptions, ideologies, etc., and therefore are more difficult to handle at an institutional level. So I think from a curatorial point of view, it's very interesting to try to find the right moment and the right duration of each of the projects, but to have all of them being shown within the screen.
Thank you. And now, Heidi, you have shown your projects in different contexts and on different urban screens. Would you say this is a new public exhibition format?
I guess it is a new exhibition format, and I think it's a very interesting format for an artist. So, like for instance, my work, I'm interested in working in different contexts, so that I produce work for museum and gallery contexts, but and also for these kind of urban contexts. And I think that what is exciting in that kind of urban context is the unpredictability of those variables that I talked about. So that I don't consider those variables as like obstacles, something to get rid of, but something that that is very important. Like all these kind of contextual layers, they are very important for the kind of narrative and conceptual aspects of the work. So that I think that like for an artist, it provides a complex but challenging and interesting environment to work on.
Mm. And what would you say is, what would you like to achieve with the art project, what you are showing for the public audience? What should happen with the public audience when they see your art project? In this urban context?
I tend to think about my work particularly in terms of encounters. So that may happen or may not happen. So, and I think that's one of the risks that I take when I set up something in urban space, that it may go by so that people don't even notice it. And I think that's part of the work's meaning, so that I don't consider that as a kind of disappointment or failure, but something that is part of that kind of narrative space in which I work. But like sometimes, like those also, like because often in my work there is this kind of interactive aspect. So I think that sometimes that encounter may become very intimate, like when people engage with the work. Mm. And those are of course like very rewarding moments when they happen.
What I noticed in the last time is that there are so many art projects that have been shown in the public space, and you know, not only art projects, let's say important issues, even problematic issues that have been presented in the public space, and in order to use the public as a stage for discussion, or as a kind of agora for participatory agora for the audience to be engaged and also to be empowered on one hand. So I sometimes really question that maybe all these problems what we are facing today can only be solved in a collaborative and interdisciplinary way. And so the question is, do you think there is a shift in the artist's role if you work with the public space and the screens? Is it a different role than you work, for example, with a gallery space or with a white cube?
Definitely. I think, well, I think I would start from something that you said when we actually were having lunch, because like you, and I think this, your question is related to that. You question whether this kind of public urban screens, whether they introduce like I don't know if you could say that question again. Like you know, what is the role in the society?
Yes, if there is a shift of the artist, for example, also to become a kind of facilitator or a kind of moderator, facing these complex kind of problems what we are having today, and what we discuss and show and present in the public space in order to include the audience into these discussions.
Because I think that from an artist's point of view, I experience a certain kind of tension like when working on this kind of public urban spaces, because I think that there is a lot of pressure to produce something that would enhance the city, and something that would, like, you know, bring that kind of aesthetic or entertaining or exciting aspect to the city space, something that would serve as a decoration, like, if I put it bluntly. And then if I think about my own work coming from this kind of critical artistic thinking and from that kind of background, so like how to negotiate those very different intentions in a public space, because I think that there is a certain responsibility that is brought with this kind of engagement with urban spaces. So, like how, like, if I hire a gallery, like I feel that I can pretty much do whatever I want there. But like if I bring something into a public space, like how do I treat that space that is inhabited by people who represent very different ways of living the city and very different cultural and social experiences, and how do I negotiate with those with my work? So I think that there is a, like, you know, certain sense of responsibility needed, with an artistic work in those spaces.
Yeah, I think these are a lot of topics. Like for Transmediale, it was the topic responsibility, I think 2 years ago, and also, yeah, what arts did this repair the future, and yeah, a lot of these topics who try to give a kind of future vision and work on the development of our cities play a very big role in the moment, and therefore I think it's yes, we have chosen a very good medium to maybe use it as a kind of canvas or infrastructure, what you said before, to use it in different ways, what I said, digital stage, or for visualization, and a lot of other possibilities. So maybe I ask my last question to Nerea, because I think then these 40 minutes are over, and you should also have the chance to ask a question to the people here on the panel. So for one question to you, Nerea. On one hand, or the main purpose where we are here in Helsinki is this launch of the Connecting Cities network, and what we hopefully will do in these coming 4 years is to build up in all these cities yes, kind of urban media facades that will be used for cultural content, for social content, and artist projects that will circulate around Europe, shared artist production, and yeah, and have also these 3 topics. What would be your wish to this Connecting Cities network as a curator?
There's many of them. So, first of all, I think what is fundamental is to generate some sort of collective knowledge that allows to imagine different potentials to urban screens that are not related to commercial purposes, which is something that for us it's evident somehow, but at a large scale, people in general always relate urban screens to just commercials, and that's it. And I think it's very important to build up this culture, which of course is not new, but trying to make it larger and larger, so that these potentials are present in owners of these urban screens, in mayors of cities, etc., etc. So that would be one. The other one would be to build up a network of institutions that not only share projects but build up this artist network, because working for media facades, as you know, Heidi, for sure, it's very difficult because they all have different technologies, the contexts are all different, the publics are all different, so the difficulty makes everybody learn from that experience, and sharing all that knowledge I think can be very productive in terms of how one can think about them, how and manage them and even produce content for them. And the third one will be to try to share technologies, which is fundamental as well. So how these interactions, how these the possibility of expanding the environment in which the screen is behaving to a larger area of the city, or even at a technical level, how we share the files to make them work at the same time. For example, as we tried in the Media Facades Festival 2010. So I think those would be the three most important ones.
Yeah. Yes, I agree to you. Thank you very much. So Mika, maybe, or you want to ask?
I'm sure we all want non-commercial screens, but I must begin because I want what would be the artist wishes for your urban media network.
You ask us.
I'm asking Heidi, because curator said what you need. What would artists need from your network? For 4 years, what 7 European cities, right?
No, not 7, 40.
40. 40. No, 4. What a lovely platform for artists. What do we want from it?
Well, actually, I don't think those are so different from what Nerea just said, because I think, like, sharing information on all levels of production is really, really important. And I have learned with the group that I have worked with, that it's really, really hard to develop your own platform. Like, when there are so many variables, like, when you think about different sites and all the challenges that they brought with them. So I think that existing infrastructures are really important, like for the development of artistic work. But I think that there is a certain play of technologies and narrative content that needs to be kept open. So that I would like to think about these infrastructures not only as something that is there, that stays on its place, but more like toolboxes where you can get different things for different sites and play with those combinations.
Yes.
Okay.
Great.
Yes.
Yeah. Can we all make a wish now? No, but it's partly a wish also for the network, but also relates to what you have been talking now. It's really about the openness, that I really think that what we should try to achieve is to affect the black box type of activity of many of the existing platforms. I think Heidi knows it well, having stuck a memory stick or DVD into a metro station screen. So that's the kind of, that's where you have to operate within this very limited context. But it also relates then to this, also the openness of the contents. And I have been now working with Icon artist group, and they are doing news transformations, and we had so many talks about like how much copyright infringement can you make in public space. And I was really, because the media houses are really aggressive, I was saying, no, you have to learn to use Creative Commons. I mean, I don't want the media houses to sue us or you. So also there are so many interesting things, like what about the openness of these platforms.
So that was more a comment on the copyright and practicalities, and now we go to this gentleman over here, whom we know from the last talk.
Thanks, Martin here. I think this is an incredibly interesting conversation, because we've worked on what you could call ready-made media, and completely built up from the ground, not at all transferable channels. So where should we work on this spectrum? Should we stay towards the fixed media, the screens, you just pop in a DVD? Or should we, how far should we go in exploring the media becoming much more materials. So also putting, you could say, saying that the artist must work with the media as materials and much more, get into the constraints of the media. How far should we go in that exploration? Because the further we go, the harder it is to exchange. I mean, unless we become the next ready-made medium, if we invent some kind of platform. Do you see the spectrum between the ready-made and the I would say the clay, the material? Should we have a position there or not?
I'll just say really quickly that I think that I want to explore the whole spectrum as much as possible, but I then let Susa continue.
Yes, I think also we should start to set up this whole spectrum and then try to maybe develop kind of lead groups so that some of them are experts or become experts for, let's say, classical urban screens, the others for media facades or also textiles, there are so interesting textiles in the moment that are developed that are an interface as well. And I think it's interesting to open and then to open the whole spectrum and then to go back to the modules, what you can at the end do in a group like we are, and
I have a question regarding, I had in 3 days ago, I had a big discussion about the art market. So how do you relate, okay, these screens shouldn't be commercial screens, but in the same way, there is a value of intellectual property that is sharing. You have mentioned before copyright and these kind of things. So how do you establish a market, or how do you establish the value of the artistical property? Is this simply sharing? What does the artist get as a feedback in a commercial value? Because there is also a way of producing content, because producing content means having time, having money to invest to make technology work for you, that it turns into a content presentation. So how do you see this going in this direction?
So I think on one hand it depends, of course, what format it is, the artist project. For example, if it is a video that can be shown everywhere, then of course there should be an artist fee when it is shown. And I think there it's somehow easy that you can say whatever percentage of the production always has to go to the artist when it is shown again. And I think it's more difficult when you talk about interactive media installations. So because the artist will always be involved, even if as the technical setting and the urban setting is seldom the same, you always have to adapt it somehow. And therefore, I think the artist will be always involved and adapted properly. So of course it's always important that for this then the artist gets a fee to do it, and yes, it's not just we take this artwork and then show it somewhere, but with interactive media installations, they are involved. And if you see at Giants of the Hoods, for example, what was shown in 2010, now they went on with this beautiful project and added to this animata avatar interaction, the bubbles with the smartphone, and so it's a work in process, and it will always be in process, and therefore you have new negotiations, and the artist will be paid, yes, for new installations properly. Please.
I think it's a fundamental question, because I think we need to build that, or to regulate somehow how all these projects are going to be exchanged, for example, and what happens with the length of the screening time, etc. But I think there's also a shift in whose producing the content, because for example, if some of the producers may be artists, but sometimes they may be more social projects or more activist projects that are run by let's say non-professional artists. So what happens in those cases? For example, what happens if you build a platform that can be used later on, where there's a payment in that situation? And what happens to openness that Mina raised before? Can we build up open platforms so that they can be shuffled, reused, reframed, reworked, etc.? So I think it's a fundamental question that we need to work on seriously.
So unless Heidi wants to comment this more.
Just a very quick comment, and I think that the more experimental the work is, the more public money is always needed. So that, like, we are lucky here in Finland because we have very good funding system, and that without that, like, we wouldn't be able to produce that kind of experimental work.
And that said, I must say, at the end of the day, to thank the panel, but let's sit here for a moment. And also thanks Minna, because I think she's collected a very interesting panel. It was lovely to listen to you, because I love the point of view statements, how you went to the actual realities of the open screen world and institutional significances. And then Heidi comes and says that, well, I'll make my own screen, you know, and we'll go on and do that. And then I loved your projects of the social attention and how both of these screen systems can be focused on the important issues. So it was really interesting discussion to hear about these things. And I was thinking of the, you know, when you, Martin, said from there, you know, what should artists be doing here? And you said the wide spectrum. I thought that's the spirit, that the arts and culture are there to move, you know, the whole ship of the thing. And I think that the movement is larger. If we influence urban culture, we're actually influencing the entire world. Because, of course, as we speak, every second, 1 million people move to a city. You know, this is the increasing mode of being a human being. We are more and more urban things. So let's give a panel applause, and then Minna might want to conclude with something.